Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take your sources and unearth the most fascinating insights. Today, we're plunging into the epic saga of one of the most iconic figures from Greek mythology, Heracles. You've sent us a truly comprehensive look, and our mission today is to uncover the nuanced character, maybe surprising origins, and enduring global impact of this legendary hero, really moving beyond just his incredible strength.
Absolutely. And Heracles is, well, he's far more than just the strong man of myth, isn't he? We'll explore his complex identity as both hero and god, how his stories evolved over time, and the profound ways his cult and character resonated across ancient cultures. It's a rich tapestry of, divine intervention, human struggle, and some truly surprising details.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Heracles is often thought of simply as a super strong hero, like you said. But your sources tell us he was also considered a god. How does that work? What makes him so unique in that regard, blurring those lines?
Well, what's fascinating here is precisely that dual nature.
Yeah.
He was born Alcaeus, or Alcides, the divine son of Zeus and the mortal Alcmene,
Okay.
and only later known as Heracles, which means glory of Hera, kind of ironic.
Right.
He embodies the closest Greek approach to what we might call a demigod, or hero's theos. You even see it in rituals. At the same festival, sacrifices were made to him first as a hero, with a chthonic libation that's a pouring onto the ground for underworld figures,
Okay.
and then right after as a god upon an altar.
Mm-hmm.
This ritual duality really highlights his unique position.
That is quite a balancing act. And speaking of his unique origin, you mentioned a truly wild birth story involving Hera's milk and the formation of the Milky Way. Can you give us the quick version of that? It sounds incredible.
It really is. So Heracles' very existence stemmed from Zeus's infidelity with alchemy, and Zeus apparently stretched one night into 3 days for this. Hera, naturally, was consumed by jealousy. She tried to prevent his birth, actually, to ensure her favored candidate, Eurystheus, became High King instead. She tricked Eilithyia, the goddess of childbirth, but Alcmene's clever servant, Galanthus, tricked Eilithyia right back, allowing Heracles to be born.
Okay, so a narrow escape right at the start.
Exactly. And then later, Athena actually brought the infant Heracles to Hera. Hera didn't recognize him, apparently, and nursed him out of pity. But he suckled so strongly that she pushed him away in pain, and her milk sprayed across the heavens, forming the Milky Way.
Amazing. So right from the start, he's deeply intertwined with the divine, and specifically with Hera, who you'd think would absolutely hate him from moment one. Which raises an important question. If he's both hero and god, how did the ancient Greeks reconcile that? Especially with that mention in the Odyssey of Odysseus encountering him in Hades.
That's a key point, yeah. And ancient critics were aware of this problem, let's call it. In Odyssey Book 11, Odysseus encounters Heracles' ghost or shade in Hades. But then the text clarifies that the man himself, Heracles, delights with the deathless gods on Olympus. This really shows the complex and probably evolving understanding of his apotheosis, his becoming a god. His cult persisted precisely because his story contained both immense suffering, the Greeks called it pathia, and that eventual ascent to heaven. It became a basis for festivals, even mysteries. And he was constantly invoked as a patron, especially for young men undergoing military training. He presided over gymnasiums, too.
Fascinating. So Hera's wrath clearly shaped his life from the get-go. We talked birth, but what about his childhood? He must have had quite a temper, right? Didn't he kill his music tutor with a lyre?
He certainly did. Not great impulse control there. After that incident, he was sent off to tend cattle, kind of rustic exile. And it was actually there, according to the sophist Prodicus, that he faced a famous allegorical choice, the choice of Heracles. Vice offered him an easy, pleasant life, while virtue offered a glorious but severe one.
And he chose the hard path.
He chose the hard path, yeah. The glorious, severe one, setting the stage for his heroic and often tragic trajectory.
And that path led him to marriage eventually. But then, tragically, Hera's madness struck again. This prompted his most famous deeds, the 12 labors. What was the core reason behind these seemingly impossible tasks?
Well, in a fit of madness induced by Hera, of course, Heracles killed his own children. Some versions say his wife Megara, too.
Oh, terrible.
Absolutely horrific. Distraught, he fled to the Oracle of Delphi. But unbeknownst to him, the oracle was guided by Hera herself at that point. He was directed to serve King Eurystheus, the very man Hera wanted on the throne instead of him, for 10 years and perform any task required. These 12 labors were essentially set as a means for him to be purified of his terrible sin, and as the myths developed, also the path to achieving immortality and godhood.
So these weren't just random strongman stunts. They were direct consequences of divine meddling and a path to purification. Let's touch on a couple of these labors that really show his cunning, not just brute force. The cleaning of the Augean stables, for instance. That involved more than just a shovel, didn't it?
That's a perfect example of his ingenuity, yes.
Wow.
Eurystheus gave him this disgusting task. Clean the stables of Augeas, home to like 3,000 cattle whose dung was apparently magically poisonous, all in a single day.
An impossible task.
Seemingly. But Heracles accomplished it by digging ditches and diverting two rivers, the Alpheos and the Peneos, to just flush the whole place clean. Clever, right? But Eurystheus, being petty and likely directed by Hera, refused to accept this labor. Why? Because Heracles had arranged to get paid for it by Augeas.
Technicality.
Exactly. And he also rejected the Lernaean Hydra labor because Heracles' nephew, Iolaus, helped him by cauterizing the necks. So because two labors were disqualified, Eurystheus had to add two more, ultimately bringing the total from 10 to the famous 12.
Right, okay. So beyond these famed labors, Heracles had a long life, filled with more adventures. He was often a benefactor to mankind, but also, as we've seen, could be a pretty terrible enemy. What's fascinating here is the sheer range of his character. Witty, playful sometimes, but also cold and vengeful.
His character truly held multitudes, as you say. He definitely used his wits when strength wasn't enough. Think about how he tricked Atlas into taking the sky back after getting the golden apples.
Right.
Or wrestling Antaeus, the giant who was immortal as long as he touched the earth. Heracles figured it out and held him aloft to strangle him. So yes, he was a benefactor, making the world safe for mankind by conquering these dangerous archaic forces.
Yeah.
But his passions, his thumos, cut both ways. He performed great deeds for friends, like wrestling death, Thanatos himself, to save Prince Amydus' wife. But he also wreaked horrible vengeance on those who crossed him, like King Augeas for stiffing him on the payment, and King Laomedon of Troy.
We'll get back to Troy.
Yeah. And Sophocles' play, the Trachiniae, even shows a real coldness in his character. He threatens his marriage to Deianira because he desires another woman, Iole, and intends to bring her into their home. This complexity isn't just, good versus bad. It's a profound reflection of how the Greeks saw heroism itself. It wasn't about perfection. It was a struggle with immense virtue, but also deep flaws, often divinely influenced.
He sounds like a force of nature, truly, in every sense. Tell us about some of his more unexpected adventures beyond the major labors. I think you mentioned something about a constellation named after him.
Yes, that's right. So, on his way back from getting the cattle of Geryon, that was his 10th labor, he got into a fight with two giants in Liguria, in modern-day Italy, France. He was finding it tough, apparently, so he prayed to his father Zeus for help. Zeus rained down stones, Heracles won, and this kneeling position as he prayed supposedly gave the name Engonasson, meaning on his knees, or the kneeler, to the constellation we now know as Hercules or Heracles.
That's great.
And another famous side quest, if you will, was rescuing Prometheus. He shot the eagle that Zeus had sent to torture Prometheus by eating his liver every day.
So he's literally etched into the stars. And speaking of far-reaching impact, he even sacked Troy before the famous Trojan War of Homer. That's a detail most people miss.
It's often overshadowed, definitely. But yes, earlier on, Poseidon had sent a sea monster to attack Troy because King Laomedon had cheated him. Heracles agreed to kill the monster if Laomedon would give him these divine horses that Zeus had given Laomedon's ancestor. Laomedon agreed. Heracles killed the monster, but then Laomedon reneged on the deal. Bad move.
Seems to be a pattern with kings reneging on deals with Heracles.
It really does. So Heracles, furious, left but later returned with an army of his followers. He sacked Troy, killed Laomedon and most of his sons, except for one, Podarces, who he spared. Podarces then became King Priam, the famous king of Troy during the later Trojan War.
Wow, so he directly influenced the setup for the Trojan War.
In a way, yes. And beyond sacking cities, he also founded them, like Tarentum in southern Italy. And he helped communities by getting rid of pests. He earned epithets like Cornopian, locust destroyer, and Hippoctonus, vine wasp killer. So, a civilizing force in multiple ways.
His personal life, though, sounds just as eventful and complex as his heroic deeds, especially relationships. Your sources highlight multiple marriages, affairs, and a massive number of children.
Indeed. He married, 4 times officially in myth. Megara, who he killed in madness. Omphale, the Lydian queen. He served as a slave for a time. She famously wore his lion's skin while he wore women's clothes. Then Deianira, whose actions led to his death. And finally, after his deification, he married Hebe, the goddess of youth and Hera's daughter, on Olympus.
Marrying his tormentor's daughter.
Right. A final reconciliation, perhaps. But beyond the marriages, there are numerous affairs. One really notable episode is sometimes called his 13th labor. King Thespius wanted descendants from Heracles, so he had Heracles sleep with all 50 of his daughters. 50. The sources vary on whether it was one per night for 50 nights or all in one epic night, either way. The result was supposedly at least 50 sons. And many ancient Greek royal lines, including the kings of Sparta and Macedon, think Alexander the Great traced their lineage back to Heracles, often through these unions.
Okay, 50 daughters in one night. That certainly adds another layer to the legend, doesn't it? Even for Greek myth, that sounds like a tall tale within a tall tale. Now, the sources also mention numerous male lovers. How is that viewed in ancient Greece, and who are some of the most prominent ones linked to him?
That's right. The sources do indicate that many myths, including Heracles', were sort of homosexualized or interpreted through the lens of pederasty, after that practice developed more formally in Greece around 630 BCE. Plutarch, writing much later, claims his male lovers were countless. The one most closely linked to him was probably Iolaus, his nephew and charioteer, who helped him with the Hydra. Their bond was seen as paradigmatic. Male couples in Thebes would even go to Iolaus's tomb to swear oaths of loyalty to each other.
Interesting.
Iolaus was another prominent one, his weapons bearer, who sailed with him on the Argo as one of the Argonauts. His abduction by nymphs caused Heracles great grief. And there was Abderus, for whom Heracles supposedly founded the city of Abdera after Abderus was killed by the mares of Diomedes. This aspect really reflects the broader cultural practices and narratives of ancient Greece regarding relationships between men and youths.
Okay. So from these diverse relationships, both male and female, to his ultimate fate, Heracles' story culminates in a really dramatic death and then apotheosis. How did this larger-than-life figure finally meet his end?
His death is famously tragic, and it circles back to lust and poison, fittingly perhaps.
Yeah.
It's primarily due to the centaur Nessus. Heracles shot Nessus with an arrow poisoned by the Lernaean Hydra's blood, remember that? Because Nessus tried to abduct his wife, Deianira.
Right, the poisoned arrows.
As Nessus was dying, he tricked Deianira. He gave her his tunic, now soaked in his blood mixed with the Hydra poison, and falsely claimed it was a love charm that would ensure Heracles' faithfulness forever. Years later, Deianira became fearful that Heracles was falling for Iola, the princess he'd brought home. So she gave Heracles the poisoned tunic to wear.
Oh, no.
Yeah. The Hydra's poison, activated by the heat of a sacrificial fire, burned through his skin, causing him immense, unbearable agony. Realizing he was dying horribly, Heracles chose a voluntary, noble end to his suffering. He had his own funeral pyre built on Mount Oeta and climbed onto it. As his mortal body burned away, his immortal side, his divine essence from Zeus, ascended to Olympus. There he was finally reconciled with Hera, married her daughter Hebe, and joined the ranks of the gods.
So his story doesn't actually end with death, but with ultimate triumph and acceptance into the divine pantheon, a truly unique end for a hero. What does Heracles' legacy look like globally then, beyond just Greece?
Oh, his influence spread incredibly far and wide. In Rome, of course, he was worshipped as Hercules, with his own distinct myths and temples. The Egyptians connected him to their own gods, like Shu, the god of air, and Khonsu, the moon god. Sometimes they identified him with the powerful ram god Hariashaf. And perhaps most surprisingly, his symbolism traveled east along the Silk Road with the Greco-Buddhist culture.
Really? How so?
His image, particularly his strength and role as a protector, is thought to have influenced the Neo-Guardian deities, those fierce, muscular figures you see guarding the entrances of Buddhist temples in Japan and elsewhere in East Asia.
That's amazing.
It is. And his presence is still felt today, maybe subtly. The name of Monaco, the principality, likely comes from Heracles Monoikos, meaning Heracles the lone dweller, referencing a temple there. And of course the Pillars of Hercules, the name given to the Strait of Gibraltar, marking the gateway between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. That's directly from his 10th labor, fetching Gerion's cattle from the edge of the world.
So as we've journeyed through Heracles' multifaceted story, what deeper insights can we, the learners, you, our listener, take away about heroism, suffering, and divinity in the ancient world?
Well, I think he truly embodies the human struggle, just elevated to mythic, divine proportions. His journey from that mortal birth through all the divine trials, the madness, the immense suffering, and then ultimately apotheosis, and really speaks volumes about the ancient Greek understanding of heroism, morality, and that complex intertwining of fate, divine will, and personal choice. He's a testament to endurance, certainly, but maybe also a profound reminder that even the greatest heroes are shaped, sometimes tragically, by forces far beyond their own control.
What an incredible deep dive into the many, many layers of Heracles. So, for you, our listener, here's a final provocative thought to mull over. If Heracles' path to godhood was paved not just with heroic deeds, but also with profound personal suffering, madness, and even terrible mistakes, what does that suggest about the ancient Greek definition of true glory and divinity? And how might that ancient perspective perhaps challenge our modern ideas of what makes a hero truly worthy of admiration?